Okay, I'm here in Los Angeles, but talking with my co-host, Sunsara Taylor, who's in New York City. Sunsara, how you doing?
Andy, I'm doing great. It's really good to be with you.
Okay, well, it's good to see you again, too. Even as every day that I think about the situation that women are facing now in places like Texas, where the right to abortion has been severely curtailed, and I think about the decision pending in the Supreme Court and these Christian fascists who are populating that court, it just fills me with anger at all of that, but particularly at the capitulation of a movement that's not even yet taking to the street. Where's the rage, the defiance? Where's the spirit of refusing to accept what really is beyond unacceptable? You know, I remember the history, the stories of how in the early years of the Nazis in Germany, every edict that came down that took away rights from Jewish people in this form, that form, the mainstream Jewish organizations denied to themselves and to each other and to their people the trajectory that things were actually on, and they found the ways to adjust. They negotiated a smaller and smaller space in which they could do what? Live with Nazism. They acted as if a fascist movement could be appeased. And the broader German population didn't do anything because it didn't immediately affect them, and they deluded themselves to think that nothing worse would happen, and it's happening to these people over there when indeed they entered the nightmare as well. So, Sunsara, what the fuck needs to be done right now to shake things loose? What are the plans to really launch mass resistance on International Women's Day, March 8th, in particular? How are we launching this around the country, but in particular in New York City?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to really agree with you that there is a ticking time bomb of outright enslavement of women that is set to go off by the Supreme Court as early as late spring. The Supreme Court is set and has signaled to the world that they are prepared to blow up abortion rights as we know it in this country. Women's fundamental right and ability to control their own bodies, their reproduction, their destinies, their lives for the state. And a court packed, as you said, with Christian fascist, fanatical, women-hating judges have made it clear that they are a ticking time bomb coming. And no one legitimately can say they don't see this coming. And yet, exactly as you're saying, and it does smack of the experience of the acquiescence and capitulation to the Nazis in the rise of Nazi Germany, the so-called women's movement, the so-called leaders of this so-called women's movement are planning and capitulating in advance, planning to lose abortion rights. And it follows a pattern that has been building for decades, precisely like you described, of there's more abortion restrictions passed in one state, so they get together and say, well, maybe we can help get women to another state. Okay, well, those states closed down. Let's get them to another state. Okay, Roe v. Wade nationally is going to fall. Well, let's focus on passing some local legislation to protect abortion in our local area because we're expecting that the national law the protection for this will be blown up. This is exactly what you're describing. It is continually working within each new assault, adjusting to each new assault, coughing up and foreclosing the lives of countless women who are being affected by these bans already, and many more who will be, but constantly working within that and telling yourself you're doing something about it, which is nothing. You're capitulating, you're conciliating, and you're letting the rest of society sleepwalk towards an absolute catastrophe. So this is why International Women's Day, March 8th, across this country, needs to be a day of massive outpourings. RiseUpForAbortionRights.org, the organization that I initiated together with others, is calling for mass outpourings on International Women's Day to raise the demand. We refuse to let the U.S. Supreme Court deny women's humanity and decimate their right to abortion. It is time for people to stand up and fight back. And on March 8th, again, Tuesday, International Women's Day in New York City, 3 o'clock at Union Square, everybody's got to be there. And across this country, there are protests being planned, and people need to plan them wherever you are. Set them up or plan a caravan to where there is a protest happening. But the other thing that's very important, we can't wait till March 8th. Because people are not paying attention. I mean, actually, the fascists, the women haters, are totally on the march. And we could talk about this too. Even in the last week, they've introduced legislation that mimics the Texas abortion bans in states across this country. They've passed a 15-week or introduced a 15-week abortion ban in Florida. They are holding anti-abortion rallies that filled the state rotunda in Oklahoma. They're on the march across the country. Our side needs to get out there. People who do not believe that women should be forced to have children against their will and enslaved in that way, we need to get out there and wake people up and shake them out of their complacency. We need to be in the streets, on the campuses, on the airwaves. We need to be wherever people are, challenging them to stop hitting the snooze button and stand up before it is too late.
I began this show with saying we've got to raise hell.
That's right.
We really got to raise unholy hell. I mean, we can't raise holy hell because that's what these Christian fundamentalists are doing. We really got to raise hell here. You know, there's so much of, the politics of the acceptable and the politics of the possible. You know, well, but, you know, they've got a majority in the Supreme Court, so we have to just go along with it. Let's just face it, we're not going to win. And as you say, they've been saying such things for 30 years, including times when things could have been done. But Bob Avakian said years ago that the politics of the possible is the politics of monstrosity. And, you know, there was a saying in the 60s, you know, be realistic, demand the impossible. If you fight for things, if you get up and fight for things, and you really do it with determination and sustained protest, a lot can change. We have seen that before in history. But unfortunately, we've not seen it too often now, although we began to see that with the beautiful rising of people for Black lives after the murder of George Floyd. Sunsara, I think we should we have a short excerpt from the film from which we take our name, a speech by Bob Avakian in 2012, BA Speaks Revolution, Nothing Less, where he's speaking about abortion and more than that, what it means to be female today, the full oppression that women face. Let's watch that and then come back and talk about what you said before about female enslavement.
And along with this, women are subjected to continual assaults on their right to abortion and even birth control. Don't let these people tell you, these so-called right-to-lifers, that the issue is the killing of innocent babies. The issue is the control over women exercised by forcing them to be mothers, whether or not they want to be at that time. Now, to have children, to raise children, can be a really beautiful experience if that's what you want to do and if you feel in a position to do it in the way that you feel that it should be done. But to have it forced on you is virtual enslavement. Not to even have the choice as to whether you will do that. And here's the key to how you know, or one key to how you know this is not about killing of innocent babies. Try to find one of these rabid anti-abortion groups that is also not opposed to birth control. You'll have a very hard time. They're all opposed to birth control because the issue is not the killing of innocent babies. It's the control and subordination of women who are regarded as getting all out of hand these days in this society, which is another reason why we have, or a contributing factor to why we have this vicious pornography. So the goal of these attacks on abortion and, yes, on birth control, the right to them, is to deny women the ability to determine something as basic as when or if they will have children and raise children or be part of raising them, forcing motherhood on them once again and enslaving them in that way. Along with all this, millions of women and girls, millions every year in this country alone, are raped, assaulted, battered, and abused, often by those who claim to be their intimate lovers, while the half of humanity that is female is everywhere treated as less than fully human. Once again, I think about the experience of black people in slavery. You know what one of the main terms the slave owners used to describe the slaves? Talking tools. Because this is how they regarded them, and this is how they were treated. They were put on the auction block to be sold, and their physical attributes were examined. their teeth, if they were women, their reproductive potential, their body shapes, their ability to work hard, their musculature. All this was examined in the most degrading way. And you think of the same thing with women today, reduced to objects to be used by men, treated as brood animals to turn out babies, and as unthinking flesh to be consumed and plundered, with their bodies and body parts used to sell products, pimped out and beaten into submission, plundered to portray and promote sex as conquest and domination by men, instead of shared pleasure based on mutual affection and equality. All of this degrades and demeans not only the women who are directly subjected to the most extreme forms of this, but all women everywhere. What kind of system is this? And why should anyone accept that this is the best possible way the world could be? And those whose sexual orientation is different from and seen as posing a threat to the dominant gender and sex relations, lesbians and gays, bisexual and transgendered people, or those who are simply unsure about their sexuality and questioning it at a given time, are harassed, bullied, often bullied to the point of committing suicide, brutalized and even murdered. And despite certain changes in law and government policy, the reality of LGBT people being discriminated against, insulted, and even assaulted continues as a marked feature of the culture and society, bound up with deep-seated structural relations of this whole system, closely connected to the patriarchy and male supremacy that oppress women.
That was Bob Avakian from his 2012 speech, BA Speaks Revolution, Nothing Less. Sunsara, Bob Avakian, he tied together a lot of the aspects and the components and a compelling picture of what oppresses women, including he began with abortion rights. And with the Supreme Court poised to rip away these rights, as we've discussed earlier, we've raised the slogan, if you will not fight against forced motherhood, then you are choosing the enslavement of women. I think this is an important thing to get into, the enslavement of women. That's very strong language, and for good reason.
Yeah, I think it is true. Bob Avakian gave an extraordinary kind of 360 picture of what it is to be female in this world of male domination. The rape, the sexual assault, the harassment, the pornification and degradation of society towards women, the assault on birth control, all of this. But right now, as is concentrated in that slogan you just read, this frontal assault on abortion rights from the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, and from a whole fascist movement that is built over decades, this concentrates the question right now in an all-around way over whether women are going to be enslaved or whether, if this is fought, women are going to be on the road to emancipation. And I think it's important to understand, what does it mean for the state to force women to have children against their will? This is the state apparatus, not yourself, not those you look to as trusted friends or family members. The state, riddled with and shaped by Christian fascist women-hating theocrats, is going to say that every single woman across this country or girl who becomes pregnant, whether by accident or through force, is going to be forced to carry that pregnancy to term, to have a child against their will, that their life, their body, their social position and standing, their economic standing, their place in the world is going to be shaped by the forcible control over a woman's life and body. It is a form of violent assertion of patriarchal degradation. It is a form of enslavement, and it will harm all women. It'll hang like a threat and a terror over the lives of every single woman and girl, and yes, over the lives of trans people who can become pregnant as well, and non-binary people who can become pregnant as well. This is an assault, a fascist assault on women, and it has to be understood as such, and it's in motion. I started by saying there's a ticking time bomb of female enslavement set to go off. Everybody knows it's coming. And that's the motion that things are going in. The Supreme Court is poised to get this right. Overnight, if they overturn Roe v. Wade, over 20 states, almost half the country, is going to immediately ban or severely restrict abortion. 41% of women in this country of childbearing age will lose the nearest abortion clinic, and it's on from there. They're not stopping there. So that is the motion of things. This is why we say, if you do not stand up and fight now, if you do not wake up everybody you can reach right now to fight this enslavement, then you are choosing female enslavement, because that's where it's going if you sit back and do nothing. So each of us has a choice to make, and we have to get out there and we have to challenge others, those we know and those we don't know. There's a lot of people who don't really want that future that is barreling towards them. But they have to be shaken out of their stupor, their slumber, their sleepwalk, their delusion, their denial, and their ignorance about what's going on. And we who understand this need to go out there and fight to wake them up right now before it is too late. It's on us, and then it's got to be on them as we go out and gather them. There is a chance, and there is time to stop this assault, to defeat this assault, and to strengthen the side of the people in doing so. But there's not a lot of time, and sitting back is choosing female enslavement.
People out there who are watching this and spreading it through social media, you need to really stop now and think about not only what this is going to mean for all the women who are forced to bear a child against her will, against her ability to raise that child, but every woman is going to have this, as Sunsara said, hanging over them. It's documented the effect that lynching, which killed over 5,000 and probably many more black people throughout the early 20th century, the end of the 19th century, every black person lived with that fear, just as every black family still has to have that conversation, particularly with their young boys, about how to behave with the police. You're not thinking about what is going to be changed into the psyche of women all over this country.
And to the psyche of men, too. I have to say,
Yes.
Just think of how this changes every interaction. And for a society to acquiesce to this, think of what side of this culture gets strengthened. What attitude towards women, what direction of society overall.
Well, the other thing is, think about the positive.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we do fight this, first off, as you said, we could win.
That's right.
Don't think you can't win a fight that's got long odds. It's been done before, and then people said, well, I always thought that would happen. It can be done, but it's going to take sacrifice. It's going to take sustained struggle. It's going to take stopping everything so that the courts and the powers that be feel this is not the time, we cannot do this. And even if we don't immediately succeed, you have momentum then. And this has a lot to do with whether or not there's going to be a revolution in this country, because it has to do with whether or not there's a people who have the determination to fight against this system and begin to see what it really does, instead of being a defeated people who accept every restrictive law, every piece of bullshit that comes from the people who rule this country. You're going to have a people who are going to say, no, we're not accepting this. And they're going to be saying, yes, we want a different world and we're ready to fight for that. So thank you very much for staying up late to be on our show. And we'll see you soon.
All right. I can't wait to see
the rest of the show. Get out there and raise some hell.
That's right. Raise some hell.